of the Overview Committee and also to those who are listening online via the broadcast. So apologies and substitutions. I've got apologies from Councillor Singh Bowler and Councillor Hatfull, and they're ably substituted by Councillors Emmett and Councillor Rashid. I will now take a roll call of committee members to confirm attendance and that the meeting is quorate. So if you could respond when called, please. Councillor Boleyn.
Present, Chair, and I can hear loud and clear.
Thank you. Councillor Bamra.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Emmett.
Here, Chair, and can hear you very clearly. Thank you.
Councillor Chowdhury.
Here, Chair, and can hear and see you very clearly.
Councillor Garfield.
I'm here, Chair, and I can hear you.
Councillor Rashid.
I'm here, Chair. I can see you and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Present, Chair, and I can hear you quite clearly.
Councillor Martin Sachs.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Sanger. Councillor Sanger. No, we don't seem to have Councillor Sanger. And
I'll check with her, Chair, just to see where she might be having access.
Right. Okay, thank you, Councillor Chowdhury. And Councillor Solanke.
Present, Chair, and I can hear you.
Thank you. So microphones will now be muted, and this should remain the case throughout the meeting to ensure that one person speaks at a time and to minimise any interference. As usual, please indicate if you wish to speak using the raised hand button and await your return to be called upon, please. The chat function can be used for comments if needed, but please note that this is not treated in any formal capacity and is visible to all participants. Declarations of interest. For this item, I'm required to remind all members to declare any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest they or their spouse or partner may have in any matter that is to be considered at this meeting. Next item, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 21st of October. That's on pages 1 to 6. Are there any corrections to the minutes, please? Or can I agree the minutes as a true record? Can you confirm that's agreed, please?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you, members. Public participation. Mr. Andy Walker has registered to ask the following question. So, Mr. Walker, I believe that you are here tonight to speak regarding item 5A, and you may now do so for up to 2 minutes, please. Mr. Walker? Can everyone hear me? Mr. Walker, are you here? Because we can't see you and I can't hear you.
Chair, Mr. Walker is on the call and he hasn't pressed mute.
Oh well.
I can't see him, Gilly, and I can't hear him.
I can see that he's on the call and his mic isn't muted.
We'll move on then.
So maybe there's a problem. Could I suggest we perhaps move on, and if he rejoins with your discretion?
Yes, I think that's fair. Thank you, Gilly, and hopefully he'll be able to connect into the meeting. So the next item is item 5. It's a consideration of the executive reports, and in line with agreed delegated authority, the following items have been selected for consideration at this meeting, and the committee is recommended to consider or note the reports. If there are any specific comments for referral to Cabinet, these will need to be recorded, including voting on if necessary, and the wording should be agreed by the committee. So the first report I have is COVID-19 emergency decisions, which is 5A. And I believe we have our Chief Executive, Andy Donald, in attendance. So if he would like to present the report to us, please, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. So the committee will be familiar with these reports now. This is the report which sets out for noting the decisions that I have made under urgency powers in relation to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The report sets out 3 decisions that were made in the period from the 30th of September through to the 22nd of October. I'll run you through each of those. The first one was the decision to locate the 3rd testing site in the borough at Charteris Road in Woodford. The second decision was around agreeing the scheme for the self-isolation payments, of which Redbridge has been given a grant of £116,000 to deliver those. They are payments of £500 for people that have lost income through having to self-isolate. And the third of these, which is slightly redundant now that we are in a wider lockdown, was the plan around the enforcement activities in that period when we were in tier 2 of the COVID restrictions, Chair. So as usual, happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Andy. Before I open it up to any other members, I would just like to say how much the Conservative group welcome and support the 3rd testing centre at Woodford. Both myself and our GLA rep Keith Prince and Sir Ian Duncan-Smith have been down to the site to see how it was operating when it first opened, and it seemed to be operating very well. I sincerely hope that residents in the West will use this really important facility because it didn't seem to be very well attended, but of course that was when it
Chair, are you on mute?
Yes, I was on mute. So you probably didn't hear a word I said, did you, Andy?
No.
We didn't hear the question. We heard the bit up to when you visited the site, Chair.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there, but anyway, it's come back on again. So I've been to see the site. I was really pleased with it, but I would like to encourage as many residents as possible to attend the site because it wasn't very busy. And I would also like to ask you, Andy, it's just so important in our borough that we do have these testing facilities. Is there any possibility of you writing to the Minister for a 4th testing site, possibly in Wanstead? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the testing sites that we have in the borough are currently operating below capacity. So I think it's unlikely that we would secure a 4th testing site. There are due to be some announcements imminently about different types of testing which may be available to the borough. And hopefully by the time we get to the next overview committee, I'll be able to share some details on those. So the one announcement I think that has been made this week is that as a local authority, we will now be able to directly book some of the tests ourselves locally for each of the sites, which I think will be very helpful as well in terms of trying to ensure that as many people as possible get tested.
Yes, thank you for that, Andy. Councillor Boleyn.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And I just want to firstly endorse what Councillor Huggett said about the 3rd testing centre. It's absolutely fantastic news for Redbridge. So well done for all those involved in that. You may recall that one of the questions I keep on putting to you since I think March and April is with regard to the vaccine. And you've seen the news on Monday with the Pfizer vaccine. And hopefully in the next 10 days, we're going to hear some really positive news about the Oxford University vaccine. And that's going to be great for us. My question is, can you update us on what's going on with regards how we're going to distribute the vaccine, get out to as many people in Redbridge as soon as possible? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So information is is pretty sketchy at the moment about which vaccines will be available and used. I don't think those decisions have been made yet. To be clear, it will not be the council that will be responsible for the administration of the vaccines. It will be the NHS, and it will be very tightly controlled by the NHS. I understand the NHS are already liaising with the local GPs in Redbridge to talk about preparations for the vaccine. And I understand that conversations are happening at a national level about who gets priority for the vaccine. That decision is made by a national committee with medical representatives on it. Beyond that, anything you read at the moment in the press is about the limit of my knowledge as well. It clearly feels that we can be a little bit more optimistic that we're closer to a vaccine, and I'll happily update the committee as and when that gets into the public domain.
Thank you, Andy.
Councillor Garfield.
Thank you, Chair. I'd really like it recorded that I think it's fantastic that we've got a third testing centre, and I think it's really important that we've got it, and particularly in the area it's in. I do recall, I might be mistaken, but I do recall that the Tories were actually against a third testing centre, but I would certainly like to say I think it's fantastic that we've got one, and congratulations to the Leader of the Council, Mark Santos, the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, and to Councillor Rye, who worked really, really hard to get the 3 centres up and running in the borough. And my question is on item 74, Andy, do we know how many people have actually claimed the isolation payments? And if they don't claim it, and what are we doing to encourage them to claim it? And if they don't claim it, do we have to return the money to the government?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. In terms of the isolation payments, my understanding at the moment is that we have paid out around about 80 isolation payments to date. That is less than the number we have claimed, because obviously there are circumstances in which people are able to claim it, and some people try to claim without being in those circumstances. It's supposed to be recompense for loss of income. I don't actually know the answer to the question. Maria might be on the call and might know the answer, but if not, we'll come back to you about whether we have to give any unpaid income back to the government at the end of that period. Forgive me, I forget the second. There was another part to the question.
Yeah, it's about how are we letting people know about it.
Yeah,
because obviously, especially if it's only 80 people that have actually claimed it.
Yes, so we are ensuring that there is communications going out at a general level across the borough, but also as of today, we have gone live with our own local contact tracing arrangements, and we will notify people through that have to isolate directly. So we'll have a direct link to people who we know are having to isolate as a consequence of contact tracing as well. So that will give us, we think, a much greater take up of the payments as well.
Can I just ask a supplementary on track and trace? I have noticed in other areas, I know I'm going off topic a bit, so do forgive me. In other areas, I think there was somewhere up north where they had actually started their own track and trace procedure because it was far more effective. Is there any chance that that is a road we go down? It might not be your area, and I do understand it's probably something I've got to ask Gladys about. But we do know that the government process has really not been working over the past 6 months, which is why we're in another lockdown. And from what I've read in other parts, I think it was somewhere up north, Calderdale, I think, council were basically setting up their own system of track and trace because they felt that was the only way to get down a lockdown. Sorry, this is a bit long-winded. So is there any chance that we could do something similar? And forgive me if this isn't the place I should be asking.
That's absolutely fine. So the test and trace, or the contact tracing figures across London in terms of completion rates have been going down from the national system, and so That is what has gone live today. We now have a local contact tracing arrangement. It plugs into the national one, and the idea behind that is because we will be better placed to be able to contact families, individuals locally, rather than through a call centre at a national level. So yes, we have gone live today on that local process, much the same as happened in other parts of the country.
Can I just quickly say, Chair, that is fantastic. I'm so pleased to hear. And you're right, we are best placed to do that. So that is just such good news. If we can, make that very clear in our comms, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. And before I go on, I'd just like to come back and refute some comments that Councillor Garfield has made. To say on record that the Conservative group were against a third testing site in the Woodford area is totally untrue, and I would hope that she would now withdraw those comments because they're quite serious allegations to make. Are you going to withdraw those comments, Councillor Garfield?
I'll think about it.
Right, thank you. If you don't, I'm going to make a formal complaint against you for not telling the truth. I'm now going to move on to Councillor Berlin. Have you still got your hand up? Have you put it down, Councillor Berlin?
Yeah, I'm going to really ask Councillor Garfield to withdraw that comment. This is supposed to be non-political. We've really kept this non-political, this committee, since we were selected in June 2018, May 2018, and to make this appalling accusation about Tories opposing the third test centre, frankly, is libellous. So I'm going to ask you personally now to withdraw this comment because it is very serious.
I do recall very clearly that you didn't support us in fighting for the test centre number 1, number 2, or even number 3. And I don't clearly, I led a campaign for the first, or worked on a campaign for the first one, and I didn't see either any of you retweet it, sign the petition, or get involved in the work that was being done to actually get the first testing centre in the borough. I haven't publicly heard you say anything until tonight that has actually supported the testing centre. In fact, I think when one was discussed for Craven Gardens, you were not particularly keen on it. For the sake of peace, and actually I'm sorry, but saying that this is unpolitical, when you made your opening statement saying that the Tories went down to visit the centre, when we have spent, all of us have spent quite a bit of time in the test and trace centre and supporting people getting there, to make that statement as your opening statement, that was political. And to actually mention that the Tory politician Ian Duncan Smith, yourself as leader of the Tories, and Keith Smith and Keith Prince all attended when we have all been going down to there. You made no mention of that. So to say that you haven't been political, I have to say that isn't the case.
Councillor Garfield, just to come back on that, Chair, if I may, what you said is quite clear. You said we oppose the third testing centre. I'm going to ask you one more time to withdraw that because it is libellous.
Okay, I will withdraw that you opposed it, but I will say that on record you didn't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Garfield. I suggest that you actually listen to the recording of the last Overview Committee meeting when you mentioned that there would be a third testing centre, when Andy said that that was the approved site, and that we actually wholeheartedly supported it and welcomed it at that time. So I would suggest that you listen to previous committee meetings and recordings before making untrue statements of that type.
I'm happy to listen to it, and if that is the case and there is proof that you have supported each of the testing centres, all 3 of them, then I'm happy to withdraw my comment.
And so you should, because the comments you've made are really quite disgusting. Councillor Rye, I can see your hand up. Did you want to speak on this item? I
did, Chair, and this is really to get some clarification, really, and I think to get some clarity on behalf of Councillor Garfield. I have very clear conversations and a trail of conversations with officers where yourself were showing real concerns about the third testing centre and actually concerns around traffic and not being in support of it initially. I do know that you have since changed your mind and you have supported it, but your initial position was not one of support on the third testing centre. But yes, I'm glad that you've changed your mind. I'm glad you've U-turned on that. I'm glad that you've supported the third testing centre. It's needed in the west of the borough, and I'm glad that we've got 3 of them in our borough, and it's been hard fought to get that through public health, through my colleagues in the cabinet.
Well, thank you, Councillor Rye, for attempting to leak confidential correspondence between myself and other members.
No attempt to leak anything.
I did. No, you let me finish my comments. You chose to make the comments you did. There were concerns over parking and traffic, but at no time did we oppose or not support that site. Now I'm going to move on because I think we've had quite enough hot air over this subject. As I say, the residents of Woodford, myself, the Conservative group, support it, and I really hope that this horrendous virus, that we get the vaccine rolled out soon so that we can stop people dying. And to suggest that we didn't support it is quite appalling. Have any other members got any comments on this report on 5A, apart from the ones that have already been made? Otherwise, I will move on and members can note this report. Right, I'm going to note the report. Is that agreed? Thank you. 5B, we're now moving on to budgetary control report, which are on pages 13 to 83. I'm not sure whether Maria or Greg Pike, or Ian or Councillor Rye are presenting this report. I know that Maria presented it last night. Is it yourself that will be doing that tonight, Maria, or will it be Councillor Rye?
Councillor Rye, would you like to start and I come in afterwards, or I'm happy to present?
You can go ahead, Maria.
So this is the BCR report for Q2, which is our budgetary control report for Q2. This is at the end of September. It's important that I draw members' attention to a few things as I talk my way through the report. So the forecast variance is just under 10.5 million overspend. That's a significant change from the last time at Q1. The total forecast variance within services in terms of overspend is just under 63 million, including just under 56 million in relation to the impact of COVID-19. This takes into account all of the information up to the end of September. We have also a number of revenue impacts. So in terms of savings that have been delivered, there are 53.7% of savings that are classified as red and a further 14.7% as classified as amber. These are included in the forecast variances as undelivered, and they're mainly due to the impact of COVID-19. The information in association with the various directorates is included within the report, and there are officers available to provide information should members require it. The capital programme at the Q2 forecast outturn is 194.9 million, and made up of 144.221 million of general fund and 50 million, just over 50.7 million in HRA. And we've adjusted the budgets. These have been reflected to include the slippage that we've had in the current financial year. We promised that this would be here at Q2 when we fully conducted our review of the capital programme, and therefore members can see the slippage as it's worked through. I'd like to also remind members that we have a breakdown in each of the directorates as to the spend within that's COVID related and also non-COVID related. As part of that, we also have within the report the breakdown of government grants that are included within the report, and that is within section, just bear with me as I scroll down, so that you can see the government grants that have been offered nationally and how many of them are within the report. I've got some apologies, folks, I've lost connection to the report, so it's not coming up as I'm looking at it. But I will direct you to that as soon as I can. I'm happy to take questions, and I'll come back in to let members know exactly where in the report it is. I think it's section 14.
Councillor Boleyn.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions. Perhaps if I start off with three, and then I'll let other people have a go. Bearing in mind the overspend, can you assure us that we will not get into the same situation as Croydon? Number two, with regard to the Quiet Street scheme, is there a financial loss to Redbridge Council as a result of scrapping the scheme in the short term? Number three, with regard to 12.8, I'd like to ask from the borough flood scheme, this £525,000 expenditure. Has this been stopped for the year? Can you update us on that, please?
You're on mute, Maria.
Sorry, apologies. Let me start again. So with regards to your first question, Councillor Boleyn, with regard to Croydon and how we fare, we're forecasting a £10 million, just over a £10 million forecast overspend at this point in the year. That's significantly changed throughout the financial year. We're in a year of COVID and there have been significant challenges, but I would point members to the fact that we have, while we've released a number of corporate provisions, the risk provision, the contingency, etc. within the corporate budgets, and we significantly slipped the capital programme, I would point members to the business risk reserve that stands at 14 million. That would be the first call on anything subject to the forecast outcome being a reality. This is still a forecast at this point in the year. It is not an actual. And further to the 14 million of the business risk reserve, there are other earmarked reserves before we would need to get to general fund balance of the 17 million. So I would say for the financial year this year, we should be able to cover the expenditure that we have as we're forecasting to date. That's not to say that we don't need more money from government, and we are hopeful that government will fund the entire cost of COVID, and that has been coming in slowly in different streams, including the more recent fourth allocation that was not as much as we'd hoped for, fourth tranche, which is in section 14. I was correct in directing you, and also the sales fees and charges recognition. So I hope that answers your question about where we are in the current financial year. I would stress that this is a forecast outturn. This has not actually taken place, and there has been significant improvement since the Q1 budgetary control report. You asked about the quieter streets. I don't have that information to hand. I don't know if there's anyone on the call that can step in and answer that question. Otherwise, we will take it away and answer it. And I have forgotten your third question. Would you mind reminding me? You're on mute, Councillor Boleyn.
It's about the borough. It's under item 12.8, the borough flood alleviation, £525,000 spend. Has that been halted for the year, or what are the plans for that?
I think there may be somebody on the call that can answer that question.
Yep, I can. So I can pick up question 2 and question 3, and I might have to defer to Josie for a bit more detail on question 3. So on question 2 with Quiet Streets, we've been in contact obviously with TfL, and we've submitted our claim. We've obviously put our case forward for why we needed to end the scheme, but that we've entered into it in good faith, and therefore, you know, we would expect to be able to reclaim the costs that have been incurred, but we are pending a decision or an outcome on that at the moment. In terms of flood alleviation capital, Josie, are you on the line? You're able to explain?
Yeah,
I think there's been a delay on that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's been a delay on the flood projects. As you know, sort of all flood projects and alleviation schemes are in conjunction with the Environment Agency. Quite a lot of their staff were furloughed through the sort of this year. So the flood alleviation schemes, there's been some slippage in terms of the capital expenditure, and there's also some redesign on some of the schemes, so that it's likely that will be spent next year.
Thank you for the answers, much appreciated.
Through you, Chair, I have an answer to a previous question on the last report about the isolation payments and whether they would need to be returned or whether we'd get to keep the money. My understanding is, unfortunately, we'd have to return it.
Thank you, Maria.
That's my understanding.
Thank you. Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the Cabinet member if we've got any idea about next year's funding settlement from the government for local government, and where that places us, basically. I mean, we know that Croydon's had trouble recently. We know Surrey Council had troubles a few years ago, and we know Northamptonshire County Council had troubles as well. Are we expecting a positive settlement so that councils get the funding that they need?
Councillor Wright, if you want to start, and I'll add.
So on the settlement, no, we haven't had that yet. We haven't actually clarified what they're going to do regarding the whole of the COVID period. It comes every so often, and we'll receive a grant. We received 3.8 million, I think it was, about 3 weeks ago, which, as far as I'm concerned, it was a derisory amount given our population and the issues that we have, and it didn't really make much sense of looking at the formula that was used, because neighbouring councils, neighbouring local authorities received in excess of double that, with smaller populations. Some of them received triple and quadruple that amount. So we've been shortchanged, as far as I'm concerned, in Redbridge. Even when you take into account of the hardship factor, as you're well aware, we house lots of people from other boroughs, so there may be the responsibility officially of an inner London borough, but we are the ones who look after their schooling costs and everything else that goes within the borough for it. So what was the second part of your question? Sorry, Northamptonshire, you said, what were you asking me? The second part, sorry.
Just on whether we're even close to what happened in Surrey or Northamptonshire, or even recently Croydon.
So each time it's happened to a different council, we've obviously always looked inwards and had a look at where we are, looking at the concerns that have come out of each of those councils. Commissioners have gone into, I think, Northamptonshire, and I think Surrey received some money in a deal a little while ago.
I think Surrey was a bit more than just a bit of money. It was called a sweetheart deal, wasn't it, with the then Prime Minister?
Yeah, I think that was a pre-election or something. It happened a pre-election, but that's what happened there. But what we have a look at is an introspective look into what we're doing to see if there are any risks, and there are risks. There are risks in every council. I think every local authority is looking in the same place. It's well documented. Doesn't matter what political hue you are. If you've had 10 years of austerity and then the impact of COVID, you will be making tough decisions, and you will be looking harshly at your bottom line. There is no space to make errors. So we're looking at it, and we will look at it, but I don't think we're anywhere close to that. And I'll look at Maria for assurance on that.
So I concur with Councillor Wright's assessment. What I would say is that we've made specific provisions within the budget to deal with risk. We've got a £6 million risk provision. We had a £3 million contingency as well. We've got a £14 million business risk reserve. We've also got a £17 million general fund balance. It's a really unusual year with COVID-19 and the pandemic. So there are costs that have been increasing both here in Redbridge and in other councils. The government grants that have come in have covered some of that, but not all of it. We've had to pull together as an organisation. We've had to stop non-essential spend. We've looked at pausing the capital programme where possible so that we could release that revenue cost of borrowing. And we've done all the things that we can do as an organisation to manage our expenditure. And that would be what's expected of us in order to manage within the cash envelope that we have as an organisation. So as I refer you to my previous comment, we're not there. And that's because we've got some of these provisions and we do have reserves. Some of these local authorities will have eaten into their reserves prior to having further unforeseen challenges. And that's part of the new processes that I would need to signal that through a report to Cabinet before my role would do anything. And I'm not signalling that today.
Thank you, Maria. Councillor Garfield, you still got your hand up. Did you want to come in on this item?
Yeah. First of all, I want to know, I mean, how confident are you that we are going to get whatever, you know, as Rishi Sunak said, whatever it takes, that we will get more money? Because, I mean, you know, it's what, 3.79 million we got a couple of weeks ago. I thought we would be getting a lot more, considering, you know, the hardship in the borough and considering that our neighbouring boroughs got so much more money. So how confident are we? And I know that we're saying we're using reserves. Is that prudent, Councillor Rye? Is that prudent to use our reserves? I mean, where will that leave us? Thank you.
I'll take the question
Give you
first.
the first bit,
Right.
yeah.
So let me start. So in terms of the report, if I point members to section 14, Councillor Garfield, you're absolutely right. We received just under £4 million in the fourth tranche. So we've had nearly £22 million in the tranches that have come through from government, and we've also, there's a row just below that that's called sales fees and charges income guarantee. There's a couple of asterisks because that's the return that we've submitted, but we don't know if it's been agreed yet at the government end. So that's the first submission that we made in terms of sales fees and charges. We have 2 more opportunities throughout the year to submit the sales fees and charges estimated loss to the council, and we will be tracking that throughout the year as we do with all of our MHCLG returns. And I just want to be clear, at the moment we are not using our reserves. The forecast £10 million overspend, if it doesn't get pulled back and if there isn't government money, then we would go to our reserves. That would be the place that we would need to go. We have made great progress in pulling that number back by taking action as an organisation, and there has been additional funding that has come in from government. I am not confident that we're going to receive all of the money because I don't have any indication that we will, but what I can say is that we have 2 more sales fees and charges returns that we will be submitting that will equally have the values of the sales fees and charges that we are losing as a council, so that they can go in, and I look forward to hearing more announcements from government as they recognise that we're in the second wave, and there will be inevitably more pressures that come through as part of that.
Just on your second question, Councillor Garfield. So on reserves, no, it's never been prudent. I think there's 1 year that we've used reserve. There's a really big disconnect between what government understands with local government finances and what's true, because too often they trot out the line that there are reserves in local government, which there are, but they're always largely, more often than not, earmarked for one purpose or another. And even then, you know, you wouldn't use reserves. We wouldn't use our savings to prop up our income unless we knew, you know, there was an additional income coming in the future, and that's the same case with local government. So we have tried our best to avoid the use of reserves because you can only use them once, and there have even been years where we've managed to put some money back into reserves, but this is proving more and more difficult this year. We would have wanted to have for example, our budget in front of members in October, and that was the intention. But the difficulty in setting the budget and the difficulty in finding the savings is becoming more and more difficult. So that has meant that we are pushing that back a little bit further. But the attempt still, as Maria has said, is that we are going to find those savings, and if we can't, then and if there is a need to use those reserves, then we may have to. But that's our last resort position. That's not where we want to be. On the assurances from government, they may or may not come, but we can't plan for that because we've got to set a budget and have that ready in a matter of weeks, essentially, and have that ready for publication. So we can't make an assumption on what they may or may not finally give us in the settlement, or whether additional funding comes through throughout this year. So we've just got to plan for what we know.
Thank you. And I just want to comment on the fact that I see that Vision have secured £550,000, which is really good. And some of the funding that's come in, the officers have brought extra funding. I think that's excellent. So thank you very much.
Councillor Solanke.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of questions. At 5.43, we talk about I think it's actually 5.44, we talk about the public health overspend and looking at other options for containing costs, including stopping or reducing contracts currently funded through the public health budget. I was just wondering, is there any indication of what these might be? And then at 5.74, the regeneration, property and planning is obviously forecasting an overspend as well. But at 5.75, we say that this position does not take into account the potential of a second wave or any further restrictions on the movement and their consequences on trade. But considering we are in a second lockdown, does this have an impact on trade and businesses? Thank you.
So I think we've got two people on the call that can help with both the questions in detail, but this report didn't take in the second wave because it was written at a time taken into account to the end of September. Inevitably, there will be some impact given that businesses are closed and we have more grants from government that we need to allocate out. So we need business grants as well as isolation payments. But I'm sure there are two others on the call. There's Matthew Essex and I think Adrian Loads as well that can answer the questions on public health. And
yes, I can pick up the public health question now, Chair. I think essentially the mitigating item is we know that the activity on these contracts does vary in the year and it tends to reduce as the year goes on. So it's essentially keeping a close eye on that activity and ensuring that the projections are in line. So we expect that rejection to sort of slowly reduce through the rest of the year. So it's more a case of, we will continue to provide the services that we have to deliver through public health, but we do expect that position to improve slowly in the course of the year.
Thank you.
And through you, Chair, I can come in on the second question if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
So yeah, as Maria said, the report is obviously to the end of September, so crystal ball not quite working accurately enough at that point to get that in. But obviously we have seen an impact. We are talking to all the businesses again. Obviously we continue to talk to them all the way through the first wave. No one has formally notified us as yet of any great challenges to either their business or their ability to pay their rent. Well, I think it is notable, of course, that it's a much shorter lockdown this time, which is beneficial to the businesses, but also there isn't quite the same level of support that there was to the businesses in respect of rent and business rates and various other bits and pieces. As Maria says, there was all the grants programme. So, I mean, it will become, in truth, Councillor Solanke, it will become clear as we go through the next couple of weeks what's going on. But I can assure you the conversations are underway, and we're trying to reach out to all of the tenant businesses that we've got. Obviously, we're starting with the bigger ones first.
Thank you.
Right, anything else, Councillor Solanke?
That's it, thank you.
All right, thank you. I've got a couple of questions, Maria, if I may. And I'm looking at the recommendations, actually, because it says a lot of the figures there. So I note at the moment that we've got an overspend position of 62.88 thousand in relation to the General Fund Service Directorate. Well, of course, this is the forecast position. Do we know what the overspend was before we went into COVID, please? what the shortfall was at that time. You may not have those figures to hand.
Do you mean at this time last year, or do you mean
before
sorry,
COVID?
Before COVID. So
yes.
COVID has been
before the budget.
Has been throughout this financial year. So we haven't had a point in this financial year where we haven't been reflecting COVID costs. Did you mean in terms of what our forecasts were in prior financial years?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
So in prior financial years, the numbers that were significantly lower in service directorates, and members will recall that we balanced overall, as Councillor Rice said, at the end of the financial year last year without needing to go into reserves at all. So there was slippage in the capital programme, capital financing was available, there was, we had the risk provision that was provided, we have the contingency, and there were a number of other items that meant that we were able to balance the budget at the end of the financial year. Those are and we took a number of actions throughout the year to help us get there. We're taking those sorts of actions this year as well as responding to COVID and awaiting grant money to come in, if that's helpful.
Yes, but I can't remember offhand because it was several months ago now, but I'm sure that at some stage before we had the expenses for COVID, that there was a forecasted shortfall before we had the COVID implications. Can you remember what that amount was, please? 23 million or something of that type seems to spring to mind.
23 million was the service forecast overspend at the end of the last financial year in 2019-20, and that was covered fully without having to go into reserves at all. And we set a budget in February 2020 where we allocated, I think, the best part of 20 million out to services in recognition of pressures and growth. Yeah, in recognition of pressures, growth. There were a couple of savings reversals where we understood that they would not be deliverable, and we took those actions. So that all other things being equal, if we didn't have COVID expenditure this year, we should have been in a position where savings would be delivered and the demand pressures wouldn't be as great as what we're seeing currently. But it is an exceptional year and we're taking exceptional action as a result.
Right, okay, thank you. And also the capital slippage in 12.1, we've got a number of indicators there indicating, I believe, overall that we've got 139 million capital slippage. We've got a number of suggestions there. Some are to do with actual slippages, some are to do with programmes that are not going to go forward. So do we have any indication at this stage whether that list is going to remain the same, or whether it will change significantly once we enter into the budget rounds?
So we already took a view in the September medium-term financial strategy update where we reprofiled the capital programme quite significantly and released some money. While we haven't published that, we've done the thinking around that. At the same time here, these are the slippage figures as at this point in the year, bearing in mind that while we're responding to COVID, some of the capital projects couldn't be carried out because of the restrictions during lockdown in the first wave. So naturally projects were paused and we were supporting critical services only during the period very early on in COVID, members will recall. So naturally there was some expenditure that wouldn't have happened because we paused, but we have actively taken a decision to slip money, to pause programmes in order to help the revenue position, because I can't guarantee that we're going to receive any more funding. So my role is to steer that within the organisation and for us all to take action to come back in on balance.
Right, okay, thank you, Maria. And in 5.36, it mentions PPE for the remainder of the year. Is that not being funded by government now?
My understanding is that we have already got some PPE and that government are funding some PPE, but I'm sure that Adrian Loads can provide more detail on that.
That is the case, Chair. Most of the PPE supply line is generally through government at the moment. We're retaining 10 to 12 weeks worth of stock at all times just to avoid any repeats of the issues we had earlier in the year.
Right, okay, thank you, Adrian. And also it mentions that the sill is going to be offset. Can anybody expand on what's happening to that, please? What areas is that going to by environment?
Do you mind just directing me to where in the report you've seen that, and then I can explain?
Oh, it's such a huge report, Maria. I think it's. I thought that Matthew might be able to answer this question.
I was going to volunteer, Chair, because I'm pretty sure it is in my area.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say it is, but I mean, yeah. So we this is a proposal that we put through with the budget last year. So under the SIL regs, the council is able to direct a defendable element of SIL receipts towards the maintenance and upkeep of infrastructure that's needed to support growth. So we're working on that at the moment. Clearly, we've got to be able to defend that with developers who pay the SIL, but typically the areas we're looking at the moment are those where we see that impact from growth. So it will most likely be around roads, around parks, you know, the things that obviously get impacted by bigger populations in the areas around new developments.
Right, okay, thank you, Matthew. And while you're there, I've got a couple of other questions for you, if I may. What happened with the buyback of the lease? It didn't go ahead, did it? What were the reasons behind that, please?
Well, very simply, the leaseholder and ourselves couldn't agree a price. Their expectation was much higher than our consideration of value, and in the end, a change in their business meant that they no longer wanted to sell the asset. So, the opportunity to acquire it effectively fell away.
Oh, that's a shame. Right, fine, thank you. And also, the leader made mention in the forum last Tuesday that the Woodford Green Library was definitely going to be refurbished. So could you tell me when that's going to be refurbished, please, and when it will be reopened?
So we have a cabinet paper being prepared at the moment for December cabinet as a general update on all things leisure and culture, and the proposal for the refurbishment of the library is going to be included within that. So the leader slightly stealing his own thunder there, but he's entitled to do that, so I'll leave that with him. In terms of the programme for that, Councillor Huggett, you're really testing me here, but it's not a huge package of work, so it will be open early in the new financial year. I don't genuinely consider that we'll manage to get the approvals in December and then get the work done before the end of March, but it will be shortly thereafter, I would have thought.
Right, thank you. Well, we'll await that with eager anticipation. Thank you very much. Councillor Berlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is regarding item 12.9, the slippage in the Regeneration and Culture Directorate. I wonder if you could update us on the situation with regard to Wanstead Swimming Pool and also Hainault Forest Country Park. That's question number one. And number two, could somebody please advise us what our exposure is to the commercial property market? Give us a total of the investment since we started purchasing them a couple of years ago. And obviously we don't have that information to hand. If you could distribute them to the committee, that'd be much appreciated.
Through you, Chair, I suppose that's me again, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Matthew.
The Wanstead Swimming Pool scheme is, I mean, it's severely impacted by COVID. We lost Porter Cabin, who were working on the modular accommodation, which is supposed to be going in to replace the block that's going to be demolished. They were whisked away onto government contracts, and we only actually got them back about 2 weeks ago, which shows you how heavily impacted that has been. And then our main contractor basically furloughed all their staff. So there was no one for us to negotiate with. I am pleased to say that in the last couple of weeks, Porter Cabin are back on site. So we have been circulating images of temporary classrooms flying through the air to go back into their rightful position. And we are just working, and we have now appointed the contractor who is undertaking the detailed design. At the moment, the programme looks like Porter Cabin working for the next few weeks. We're working with the school to agree a timetable for the demolition of the existing school buildings. I mean, that clearly, yeah, we're very keen to do that in the least disruptive point possible. So we're targeting holidays. You know, sadly, I doubt very much it'll be over Christmas because the whole business closes down, but we'll be looking obviously for the next half-term point thereafter. And all things being equal, we should be on site, therefore, with the main contract in the late spring, early summer next year. I don't have a detailed programme to hand. I can certainly get the team to update and circulate that after the meeting. Hainault Forest Country Park, we're on site with some of that, working through the rest of the conditions to the grant with Vision and other colleagues around that site. I'm afraid for more detail than that, Councillor Billen, I'll have to come back to you because I haven't got it immediately with me. And on the commercial property estate, I mean, we've ultimately ended up spending, these are rough and tough figures, but I think of the £100 million fund that we created, we ultimately spent in the order of £75 million of that. We have a rental income stream off the back of that of just in excess of £5 million a year. Our total rental stream from all commercial lettings is about £7.3 million a year from memory. But of course, the council's already always had some portfolio. So the addition of what we bought through the more commercial effort of the last couple of years is, as I say, just over £5 million.
So just to clarify on that, so what you're saying is the commercial investment purchase is roughly £75 million? Roughly,
yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at the relevant item in the report, you'll see that at the moment we're forecasting about well, it's not quite there in level of detail, but at the moment we're currently forecasting about a £450,000 underpayment or under collection of rent. That's largely down to just 2 tenants in part of the commercial estate, one of which is gone for a CVA and the other one is restructuring their leasing term.
Right, thank you, Matthew. I can't see any other members wanting to ask questions, so can we agree to note the recommendations in the Cabinet report? I think that's agreed by everybody. I see hands going up. Thank you. So we come on to the next item, which is 5C, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review. Will you be presenting that, Maria? Or is Councillor Rye?
We've also got Jan Grant on the call.
Oh, right, okay.
I will defer to you to present.
Right, Jan, welcome to Overview. If you'd like to present the report, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Right, the report before you, the mid-year report, is a report on the strategy, the Treasury Management Strategy that was agreed by Council back in February. The mid-year review covers basically the borrowing and investment and management of the Council's finances. So if I can take you to paragraph 5, that sets out the Council's borrowing. Paragraph 5.9 gives you a table of our current borrowing portfolio, and you can see that overall our total borrowing is 330.74 million, and we're paying a rate of 2.72%, which is quite low. We've spoken about the capital programme, and as a result of that and the reprofiling, we will be borrowing 135 million less this year than we would have done if we had completed the whole capital programme as set at budget time. Our borrowing requirement has now gone down to 87 million from over 200 million, and that is set out in paragraph 5.11. External borrowing, we've not taken any external borrowing so far this year. We've repaid 4 million of borrowing. We are receiving 18.7 million from our bond that we will receive in November. With regards to the remaining borrowing, the Council is at the moment just keeping an eye on what's happening with the PWLB consultation and whether there will be a reduction in the borrowing rates. The Council does have a healthy investment portfolio, and these resources are liquid. Majority of these resources are liquid, so we can use these in lieu of borrowing in the short term. Moving on to our investment strategy, as at the end of September, the Council's portfolio stood at 161.3 million, and of that, 141 was in short term, which is less than a year, and 20 million of that was in longer term borrowing, and that is with the CCLA fund. Our average rate of return for the first 6 months was 0.98%, which when you compare base rate at 0.1%, the council is doing reasonably well on its investment portfolio at the moment. If I can just give you a little update on our CCLA investment, this is a long-term investment, and as all property, it is volatile and it goes up and down. And these extraordinary times that we have been in have taken their toll on the property market. And that has resulted in the value of the portfolio, the bid value, which is the value you could sell it at, falling to approximately 17.4 million. However, this would only be a loss if we was to sell now. We are actually planning to be in this investment for at least 5 to 10 years, and that gives us time for the market to recover, and therefore the price will also recover along at the same time. However, what you do need to look when you're looking at your long-term investments is what they're yielding. This investment is yielding a gross return of 4.26%, which equates to a net return of 3.26%. So this is welcome income that will help support council services. The final thing I would guide you to are the prudential indicators, which are set out in paragraph 10. The council is required to set these prudential indicators at the time of the budget and then to review them as the year goes on. As part of the mid-year review, we have looked at these indicators, and the only amendments that we've made to them are related to the change in the capital programme. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jan. That was very comprehensive. Councillor Boleyn.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, thank you for having greater transparency on this CCLA investment. I've been calling for this for a number of months, and I mean, as you can see, we paid 20 million for it, and it's worth about 17.4. It is not true to say that the value has fallen only since COVID. If you look at the price of the bonds pre-COVID, it's been on a slippery slope for some considerable time. So I don't think, with greatest respect, that information is accurate. Secondly, if we're going to be completely transparent about our investments, they should be valued at what they're worth. Now, if you've got 10 million invested in a bank, it's quite easy. The liquid value is 10 million pounds. And these bonds are not worth 20 million. That's the purchase price. If we had to sell them, and that's what reserves are for emergency, if we had to get our reserves, we wouldn't get 20 million. So this bond should be valued actually at the bid price, and would you therefore give consideration to changing that in the future?
Okay, yes, we'll take that on board.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, can I just respond? I mean,
Yes,
we're valuing them in exactly the way that we've been asked to value them, Councillor Boleyn. I hear all of the comments that you've made. They do not, currently any fluctuations in the value, whether increase or decrease, does not hit our bottom line as an organisation, but we understand the risks involved and we have made provisions for that. In the years where there are increases, they will go into a reserve, and in the years where there are decreases, to smooth. But currently, there isn't that risk is not a current risk for us in this current financial year. Jan, you can remind me how many years we do have of the government enabling that not to be the case?
The government enabled 5 years initially, so we've got until 2023, and then they will look at it again at that time to evaluate and see where we are.
Obviously, we will monitor these like we do with any investments, including pension fund investments, etc., throughout the financial year and throughout the years concerned. But they are meant to be long term, not short term.
Chair, if I could come back, please, on that.
Yes, of course, yes.
I mean, I'm not criticising you for investing in this bond. I mean, historically, you know, they're very, very well respected. And if you look at the way the the money is invested, very, very little is in retail. Most of it is industrial. I'm actually surprised they're actually not doing better than they're actually doing. But the reason why the yield is high is because the risk is higher. And it's no good having a high investment bond, high yield, if the value of the bond is going to keep on going down. So I would suggest that you really have a good review of the CCLA bonds moving forward.
Through you, Chair, if I can come back on that. With regards to the yield is based on the rental payments that the fund receives. And so the fund is obviously receiving these rental payments in from their tenants and the various people that own that. So I don't think it's so much high risk. I think high risk is probably not the word that we would have used there, given that, as you say, most of these are industrial outlets, and there's various student accommodation and various other things. And these are all items where people are paying rents on a monthly basis, and this is what is collected and what is eventually distributed back then through the people that invest in the bond in a form of a dividend.
Jan, can you just remind us of the return on the CCLA?
As at the end of September, the return was 4.26 gross, and that equates to 3.26 net. We pay 1% management fee for it.
Is that satisfactory, Councillor Boleyn? Does that answer your questions?
It kind of answered the questions. I don't necessarily agree with it, but let's just hope that the investment materialises and the value of the bonds go up substantially, and we'll make a lot of money out of this. But I am concerned.
Thank you. Councillor Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask what the overall impact has been of the CCLA investment, and also what it means for the people of the borough. I see Councillor Rye has his hand up as well. He might want to.
Councillor Rye, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So as a gross amount, it's somewhere in the region of £850,000. So the alternative would be to leave it on deposit, and you can see in the report what the deposit rates are. It's under 1%, and in many cases around 0.5%. So it means £850,000 gross. That's money that we're ploughing back into our services. Without that, services suffer. There's also a it's probably not deliberate, maybe just a lack of understanding, but commercial property is not considered remotely high risk. When you look at the investment risks, you start off with cash, which is considered the lowest risk, and then you move into property and bonds, which is the next level up. And even then, cash has its own risk. Cash has a risk of inflation loss, where every penny we hold in cash, and it's below 1%, and inflation sitting at, when inflation sitting at above that, for example, we're losing that value. So there isn't a risk-free investment out there at all. And every time we hold money in cash, we're losing value in it. And anybody who holds money in cash and savings is generally losing money every day, because the buying power of it is dropping. So there's nothing that's risk-free. I think the important thing to understand is that the residents of the borough are seeing the impact, because the best part of £750,000 is being ploughed back into services, and we have that to retain services that we all want to keep.
Thank you. Councillor Slanky.
Thank you, Chair. Our borrowing rate has come down significantly, and that must make a huge difference to the payments that the council makes. That's a really good result. Are you planning on any further restructure?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take that. With regards to restructuring, we do look at the portfolio regularly to see if there is any benefit for restructuring and reducing our cost of borrowing. The majority of the council's borrowing that we could restructure is in what is known as PWLB loans. I mean, the main bulk, 263 million of our portfolio is in that. Unfortunately, the PWLB charge a penal rate for wanting to repay your bonds. At the moment, if we wanted to reschedule and repay, their rates are negative up to 10 years. So there is, unfortunately, at the moment, if we was to do that, the penalty would be far too high for us to afford, and there would be no benefit. But that being said, we still always do make, keep it under review, because going forward, as rates move, we move more into normal times, there may be opportunities.
Thank you.
Councillor Garfield?
Thank you. I think you might have answered some of this, but can you tell us more about the 1% levy on PWLB rates? Where and why did it come about, and who makes a profit from them?
Okay. Levy is probably not quite the word. If I explain how it works. So the government or Treasury set the rate of borrowing, and it's based on the gilt yields plus a margin. The margin used to be 100 basis points, 1%. And we would get 20 basis points off of that if we were borrowing for certain capital schemes. So in fact, we were paying gilts plus 80%, 80 basis points. Without warning, in October last year, the government decided to increase the rate to 200 basis points above, or 180 if you were entitled to the certainty rate. The reason they gave for this was in order to cut down on the borrowing from the PWLB. The PWLB has a quota, effectively, and people were borrowing far too fast, and we were nearing the quota. And also, I think the Treasury saw that local authorities were using borrowing from the PWLB more for commercial type assets rather than for operational assets. So it just, we woke up one morning and there was a letter saying it's gone up by 1%. There has been a consultation, but we haven't had the outcome of that, and that's due to the COVID. We are expecting something at some point.
Thank you. Can I just come back on that? So, just to be clear, the government is now profiting from our borrowing for schools and housing and regeneration. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, right. So basically, they're making a profit out of our money. So they're giving it to us and then they're taking it back again.
Yep.
Right, okay. So the only way we can actually benefit is by our investments and things like property and so on. Is that right? I'm sorry, I'm not, I'm not an expert on investment.
So through you, Chair. The answer is that every council is looking at ways to kind of improve their income and bring in extra revenue, and hence why people will look at commercial property and other investments. But yes, that I'll call it a levy, Jan won't, but I will. That premium, that levy that was thrown onto borrowing for councils last year, that largely went unnoticed as far as the public were concerned. It's not something the public would be interested in or would be paying attention to. But effectively, that's what it was. It was a way of collecting money off of local authorities because our borrowing still had to happen. Our regeneration, our work for schools, our building projects were still going to happen regardless. It just made it more expensive, and it meant we were paying back. So if you borrow, if you want to regenerate your area, or if you want to build homes, then you have to pay the government for that privilege.
Right, thanks for clarifying that. That's really helpful.
Councillor Bloom?
Yeah, I just want to come back and actually agree with something Jan just said. The reason why we had the increase of 100 basis points. What was going on with councils, and I'm trying to make this non-political, this is Conservative councils and Labour councils up and down the country. They were getting into ridiculous buying of commercial property investments, paying over the odds. You've seen what's happened in Croydon. They bid over 5 million, and they bought something for 40 million, 5 million over value. It's overheated, and this decision to literally increase the interest rate by 100 basis points, I think has saved so many councils around the country, both Conservative and Labour. And it saved us. It has saved us. It really has done, because we probably would have got involved in more commercial property investments and lost more money. Anybody buying commercial investments this time last year will be looking on a paper loss of a 25% if it's retail. It's been absolutely hard hit the commercial property market. I'm so glad we haven't gone ahead and paid these stupid prices. And other councils up and down the country have been saved because of this decision.
Councillor Wright?
So just to come back on the...
Sorry, Maria, did you want to come in?
I'll let Councillor Wright come in first.
Right, thank you.
There are no doubt that there are councils that would make poor decisions on that may have made poor decisions on their commercial investments, but every one of them have to go through a business plan. Every single council gets audited each year, far more stringently than most other organisations on what they spend and where they spend it on, and they all have to put together a business plan to show, as we do, to demonstrate what your return is on this investment. And so there will always be ups and downs in the market. I mean, anybody buying at any time will have an expectation to hold a property for the next 20 years at the very least, and largely will expect in that interim to see ups and downs. There will be time when there are voids. There will be times when the value will go up and down. But the ultimate aim has been to generate an income, and councils largely have done that. There are some that may not have, but pointing to this being the particular reason why council may have fallen is a bit simplistic, because an easier one to point to, Councillor Berlin, would be to say that 63% of council's funding has dropped effectively over 10 years. That would be a far easier way to explain why a council may have fallen. I don't think some commercial activity will, and the reason being that, and you'll know this anyway, is that this council, well before my time and your time and anybody else on this call's time, has always owned commercial property. We own lots of commercial property, we always have. We own it in the borough, and that has seen ups and downs through the 80s, through the 90s, and before that. But ultimately, they're still worth a lot more than we ever purchased them for, and they all return an income, which Matthew explained earlier on, which is propping up the revenue so that we can continue with the services we have. So there are lots of reasons why council might fall down. Poor decision making might be one of that as well, but it's not as simplistic as saying it's commercial property. And I think also it's been well documented that commercial property funds have been complaining to the government and lobbying the government and saying that we're rather upset that local authorities are coming in and competing with us. And I think those fund managers have probably had a bigger influence on government policy than our decision making to buy a retail unit in Ilford Town Centre.
Maria, did you want to come back at all?
I just wanted to add that taking out borrowing is something that we do throughout the financial year, taking borrowing out at the most opportune rates. Local authorities will have been taking out borrowing for all sorts of reasons: building housing, fixing roads, building schools. There are a number of reasons why local authorities would have been taking out borrowing. Not every local authority is borrowed up to the capital financing requirement, and therefore has that opportunity to take out borrowing at the best rates that are in the market at the time. So we need to remember that, and government's reaction to the 100 basis points, as Jan has mentioned, then being added, the explanation around it is all about the debt rising very, very high, or increasing by a greater amount than in previous years, I think is fair to say. I think what I'd also say around our investment property acquisitions, that they're in areas where we've set out in our capital investment strategy to help the economy regenerate, to create jobs. They supported all of the criteria that we'd set aside in our capital investment strategy, linked to local London, and understanding that that was our patch. Now things have changed and moved on since then, and we have, as an organisation, changed our approach. But I think it's important to recognise that there were more benefits to the investment acquisitions than a return.
Thank you, Maria. I just hope we don't use the same auditors that Croydon use. Councillor Berlin, did you want to come back again?
Or Northampton?
No, thank you.
No, you didn't. Right, thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick question, please. The PWLB, I'm assuming that is still the cheapest way of borrowing for the council, is it?
Can I answer that, Jan? It
You
wasn't
certainly
at the
can,
time.
Maria.
It wasn't at the time we took out the bond,
No.
and that's why we took out the bond. But generally speaking, historically, Chair, it has been the cheapest way to borrow. But at the time we took out the bond was significantly cheaper, and the government had just added the 1%, the 100 basis points. So that's why we decided to go with the bond at the time. Jan, I don't know if you want to add anything or if I've stolen your thunder.
No, and this is not the first time. I mean, there have been times going back sort of 10 years or so when the PWLB wasn't the cheapest lender. And that was at the time that the council took out their market loans, their LOBOs, because we did a comparison. And at the time, we could get these at a cheaper rate from the market than we could from the PWLB. So they're not always the cheapest. And that's why the council looks around and maintains a diverse borrowing portfolio.
Right, thank you, Jan. And also, I know that in the report that we're not proposing to borrow any more external funding this year. But if we had to, would we take that? Would we take that borrowing via external means, or would we take it through internal resources?
The report doesn't say that we won't take any external borrowing this year. The report says that we haven't taken any yet. But the report does set out in paragraph 5.12 our borrowing requirement, and our borrowing requirement is for the 87 million for the capital programme plus maturing debt and refinancing. So there is a borrowing requirement. It's just that we haven't taken those funds at the moment.
And would that be by way of external borrowing then?
It may be. We will evaluate it at the time when we need to consider how we're going to do our financing. We meet monthly to discuss borrowing. So, yes, that is kept under review on a monthly basis.
Right, okay, thank you. Councillor Boleyn, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just one quick one. Yeah, I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again this evening. You know, you've done very well with the 50-year zero coupon bond. My question is, are these bonds actually traded on the London Stock Exchange?
When we initially did the issuance, the bond could have been traded on the London Stock Exchange. However, at that time, we had one party that just wanted to buy the whole amount that was up for issue at that time. So that was the whole 75 million that was at that time. So that's at the moment we've only got one holder, and that's the only bonds that are in issue. Now that doesn't mean that they can't sell them at some point in the future, but now at the moment there's only one bond holder.
Okay, thank you, Jan.
Right, thank you. I can't see any other members. So can we agree to note the recommendations in the Cabinet report? And if you could either type agreed or just indicate yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I now come on to 6, which is the pre-decision scrutiny. And in line with the usual practice, can we agree to delegate authority to the Head of Policy, Qualities and Communities in liaison with the Chair and spokespersons to consider which reports should be presented at the next meeting from the Cabinet Forward Plan? Is that agreed? Thank you. The date of our next meeting is the 14th of December 2020. I don't have any urgent items, and before there is a motion to exclude the public, but I'm not sure whether Andy Walker is on the link now. Julie, did he come back at all, or do you not know?
No, Chair. The item that he wanted to speak on has actually passed.
Right.
So it's either that he speaks under public participation or the item that he needed to speak on, and unfortunately he missed the opportunity. However, I have emailed him and explained that the same item is going to be discussed at Cabinet in case he wanted to register and speak there.
Right, thank you very much, Julie. Oh, I can now see 2 hands up. Councillor Boleyn, did you want to come back?
I think that was from before, Chair.
I think so. Oh, and I've got Councillor Garfield. Was that from before as well?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, that was from before.
Yeah, if you can put your hand down, please. Right, and I think that's it.
Sorry about that, Chair.
Okay, motion to exclude the public. There are no exempt items. So thank you everybody for your attendance, and I'm now closing the meeting at 20:39. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And